Now on BBC Radio 4, time for Forethought. James Daunt gives a personal view in front of an audience at the RSA in central London. The presenter is David Baddiel.
Tonight's speaker used to work in investment banking. That doesn't make him a bad person. Well, okay, maybe it did. But James Daunt more than made up for his time in that den of evil by leaving it for the haven of goodness that is Daunt's books. And he has just left that to take over as head of a major company, Waterstones, which he is already starting to turn round from the verge of bankruptcy. Waterstones is, of course, one of our last proper book chains. So as a writer myself, I basically think of him as Gotham City thinks of Batman, a saviour, all that stands between us and a world in which you can only get books from Asda by Katie Price. Tonight, he is going to discuss the future of books, of reading, of libraries and of bookshops. James Daunt.
Thank you, David, for that very generous welcome. 20-odd years ago, a bit more, I decided to leave my office job, which I hadn't been in for terribly long, persuaded by my now wife that I should marry my personal passion, which was reading, with my working life. And certainly, looking back now, that was a wise decision that has been more than fulfilled in those early expectations. The one thing I think I didn't believe when I was 24 was that the job had some intrinsic merit to it, that it mattered in any way within society or our communities as a whole. And that I now no longer do believe. I think it really does matter. And that the profession of the bookseller, which at this moment, and the reason I'm speaking to you is because, as David intimated, we are facing a particular and rather dramatic moment of crises, which we share with our fellow purveyors of the written word, librarians, for quite different reasons, but coincidentally at precisely the same moment. It's slightly superfluous to talk about the merits of reading to a Radio 4 audience, but nonetheless, perhaps we can sort of quickly reprise them. We all understand that children need to read, need to enjoy the pleasures of discovery of reading, and I think we all of us understand that that carries on throughout our entire lifespan. There is perfectly sensible research that gives overwhelming evidence that reading enhances our enjoyment of life, our very happiness, and indeed our success. It is an essential life skill. We had a short while ago the Booker Prize, a particularly vibrant moment in the bookseller's calendar, sponsored by the Man Group because it focuses a huge amount of interest on the best novels of the moment. The Man Group, though, also, and I particularly salute them for this, do an awful lot of further funding and charitable giving around literacy. They have reacted to the appalling statistics that we have. I think it is currently said that 1 in 6 of the adults in this country have difficulty reading. So they do work with volunteer reading groups, with the prisons, with the RNIB, with the various disadvantaged elements of our society into which the introduction of reading and books brings considerable benefit. Libraries and bookshops are, I think, absolutely integral parts of that process. And I might first address libraries, who clearly face a funding crisis, and that seems a devastation on our particular community. My own daughters, who clearly have access, almost unlimited access to books through my bookshops. Nonetheless, every week at least, they're down in the local library. I personally grew up being taken down by my mother to the library to pick my books up. I would never have got into books, I think, without those libraries. And it seems to me a point of national scandal that element of our community is being imperiled. And I think we all of us should encourage our political masters, in whom obviously the decision ultimately resides, to recognize that this is a tiny cost to keep this inestimable benefit within our communities. And I suppose that is the very problem of it. It is inestimable. We cannot put a number on it. We can simply put a number on this tiny amount of money that would be saved. I myself obviously sit on the other side of our particular engagement with the physical book in the High Street bookshop, which rather oddly has always been there, but has not been there as it is now until relatively recently. And Where we are now, we have chain bookshops, these large bookshops of which obviously I'm now running the major part of. Big, open, vibrant, dynamic places in which one can access this enormous range of books. That is a recent trend. They only began, Tim Waterson opened his first bookshop 30 years ago, almost to the day. Prior to that, we had little shops, the kind of shop actually that I opened up 22 years ago. Little shops which are lovely, but they are necessarily fairly elitist, and they're small. They are somewhat intimidating. They cater beautifully to that tiny strata of the highly literate and the inveterate book buyers. They don't actually do very well for the broader, occasional book buyer. They don't work, I don't think, particularly well for the teenager that you will find sitting in the back of every Waterston's every Saturday, sitting there in a corner in between the bookshelves with their nose stuck in a book, enjoying books, not buying them, almost certainly not buy a single book in the 5 years in which she comes in on an occasional basis and sits there. We don't mind that. And that's what these chain bookshops, these big bookshops, do. And I think as part of their communities, they play an extremely important role. They are a focus of meeting authors, their events, their book clubs, and we cater to everybody. We cater to you when you're in a pram, when you can first reach out your hand, you enjoy a bookshop, really until that moment when you're being wheeled back in another sort of pram, in your wheelchair, and you're still vaguely compos mentis, you will still gain benefit from being in a bookshop and that sense of community, complete community. Sadly, we've rather lost our way as bookshops. I was sent something which I brought saying, there is no other kind of shop in the world that can offer the wealth of inspiration and excitement, the opportunity to discover, and the sheer pleasure of immersion that a bookshop, a good bookshop, can offer. I mean, that is what we should be doing, and that is what we need to be doing, but we somehow lost our way, really over the last 5 years or so, in which we allowed a commercial imperative to drown the way in which we did seek to engage with our local communities and inspire our customers. We became uniform. We retailed our books as retailers. We had something called a planogram, which was a word I'd never heard until a couple of months ago. It is a photograph which tells the bookseller in exactly what order to place the books. Mr. Baddiel's publisher has paid X to be third one down in the fourth bay in, second shelf. That kind of retailing, which puts exactly the same bookshop in Romford as it does in Hampstead, as it does in Truro, as it does in Ayr, as it does in Morpeth, is quite clearly wholly ineffective, and our customers have reacted to that and have left us. We need to re-engage with our customers, and it's not actually just Waterston's, it's chain booksellers as a whole, to which this invidious commercial imperative snuck its way, driven, I have to say, by a checkbook being waived, and the delights of a checkbook as a former banker, I quite understand. Nonetheless, in the long run, obviously, we have lost our customers. And what we did is we crushed individuality, but probably most important of all, we lost our tether to our local community. We lost that absolutely essential thing where we, as booksellers, were seeking to curate our shops for the people and the community in which we lived and to which we effectively are in service. I think redressing that is relatively simple. Libraries, as I've said, that is a political decision. That requires somebody to write a check just to simply keep a fabulous infrastructure going at a cost. I'm not suggesting for a moment that is something that should apply to the high street bookshop. The high street bookshop must and needs to survive within a commercial world. But if we serve our book reading communities, that I believe is likely to happen. We need to restore individuality, we need to restore that creativity, we need to allow our individual booksellers to put the books that they think will best satisfy their local customers, to juxtaposition books, to provide excitement, and to make sure that for everybody walking up and down our high streets, it is an irresistible magnet, and that the bookshop is something in which you wish to spend time. It is, of course, a little bit about value, and we cannot ignore the competitors and the competitive environment in which we find ourselves situated. Some elements of that are beyond our control. It's within the hands of publishers. I think most of us would understand that the physical product, the physical book, is an integral part of the reading experience. When you open up a book and react to it, I find almost as you begin reading, there is that sort of interaction with the written book, the page, the cover, the type of paper, the font, the typeface. And I find, even thinking back to the great books someone's read in the past, and Julian Barnes is obviously our current Booker Prize winner, A Sense of an Ending is a just irresistible physical product. If any of you have not picked it up, go into a local bookshop, pick it up, and you will simply have to buy it. It is a super book, and therefore is worth it. But it is an even better book when you're holding it, when you're appreciating the care and attention that that publisher, the designer, the fact that it has blackened edges and is cut beautifully, and all of those things, they really matter. We as a general industry, and therefore encompassing our publishing friends, need to recognize that and need to understand that it's the whole element of what we're presenting our book readers and book buyers that needs to engage with them. The digital world is obviously upon us, and I think that really works and has a time and a place, but it doesn't across the whole spectrum of the books that we're offering. It doesn't work for children's books. I think it's actually extremely dangerous within children's reading, because at the mere flick of a click, you can go from reading Jane Eyre to being back on Facebook and YouTube and all the other immediate attractions, let alone video games and the like. I'm not sure that that is a wholly healthy place to be in. Reading is difficult. Reading, if you're going to get full enjoyment from it, is something that you have to work at. Whether that discipline can be maintained when absolutely at the click a little flick, you can go to something that gives you instant and much easier enjoyments. As a parent of a teenager, I somewhat doubt. But we can do this. We can give you completely compelling physical bookshops. You can be part of an ecosystem which has digital, which has this very impersonal internet offer, which is highly efficient. If you know what you want, bang, it'll give it to you. But it doesn't give you the sense of discovery of a physical bookshop. It doesn't give you the sense of physical interaction that a library gives you. And the supermarkets, who are the other sort of great new entrant into the world of books, and actually one that I wholly welcome. I think as the bookshop coexists with the library, in a sense, the supermarket is just another means which encourages people to buy books, and is probably a place in which many people who are first coming to book ownership encounter books and are encouraged to pick that first one up, get it on their shelves. If you start buying books in Tesco's, you will surely end up within a proper bookshop sooner or later. So I wholly support them. But I think that generally the digital, the e-book, the internet with its ferocious efficiency, all of that should simply be a complement and a support to the central hub of reading, which is around the physical book and the interaction with it within the community, within the local community, and therefore around the local library and the local high street bookshop. Thank you very much.
James Daunt was the speaker in Forethought, presented by David Baddiel. The producer was Giles Edwards, and you can catch up with the other programmes in the series or download the podcast via the Radio 4 website.